Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. Today is going to be a special video. I'm going to look at the reasons why I love low-grade comics. Now, most comic book collectors, they want the high grades. We all want the high grades. We want the 9/8, and we want those best quality books that you can get out there. And I do too. I do love a 9/8. I love a 10 if I can get a 10. But a lot of the time we can't get those books. And I want to really give you my reasoning behind why I actually prefer, in some ways, the low grades. And I'll explain why, and I'll give you some reasoning behind my thoughts on why you should look at low grades is not only a good potential way of getting good books, but as a way of even looking at them as an investment. So I'm going to give you my 6 reasons, and they will kind of clarify this idea. And it was really an idea that was born out of me doing my top 100 lists. Because when I look at my top 100 lists, I see a lot of books that are in low grades. and, and it's because of the fact that these are books that are generally in high grade out of my price range. A lot of these books are books that are millions of dollars in a high grade. And that's really my first point that I want to make. My first point and the first reason why I like low grade books is just to get the book. you know, those big books, you cannot get them in high grade because you will have to sell your house or sell every other comic book you have in order to get them. And I'll give you a good example of that. One of the books that I really wanted in my collection, I couldn't afford in a high grade. I could only afford it in a low grade. And even in a low grade, it's expensive. Is this book right here. Sensation Comics #1, first cover appearance of Wonder Woman, a character that I really love. She's maybe my second favorite character of all time. And I really, wanted to have this book. I really wanted to get that early appearance, that first appearance on the cover. I just think this is a great book. I just really wanted it in my collection. And even in a 0.5, it's like over $10,000. So how would I be able to afford, if this is even stretching my limits, how would I be able to get the book if I didn't go for that low grade? So the very first thing first reason why I like low grades is it allows me that opportunity to buy a book that I really, really want. And, I'm sacrificing the quality of the book, but at least I get that book in my collection. I can say, oh, wow, I have that book. So there was actually a funny story about this. There was a recent sale, and I think it's actually one of the funniest sales that I've ever seen. And I can't even believe that this happened in a way because it was so silly. But there was a CGC graded book, and to call it a book is really stretching the definition of a book, because it was literally just a little piece about that big of a 1. It was the number 1, and that number 1 was from Action Comics #1. And basically you could buy Action Comics #1, but only that little piece. Well, it's still cool to have that in your collection. I can't believe that CGC actually certified that little piece of an Action 1, but they did. And somebody bought it. I think it was like several $1,000s actually. But it's kind of a cool thing to have, even though it's really, really lame in a lot of ways. It's like just a small piece of a big book. But somebody can now say that they have an Action 1, literally the 1 of Action 1. But it is having that book, to get that book. And it's probably the only way you could get an Action 1, because even a 0.5 Action 1 is going to be $100,000 plus. So, it's one of those things, like it may be the only way somebody could get that book. So the low grades give you that opportunity. And that gets to my second point. My second point is really about the collectors in mind. This is where, as a collector, I try to get the book. I want that book in my collection. But there are people who don't just see comics as something you collect, but they want it as an investment. And a low grade book usually is not seen as a good investment. Like that's what people think. And I want to change people's ideas about that, because what happens is, just like me, I'm a collector. I want to get that book. There are more people that want to get that book. There are lots of people that want to get that book. And so people will generally pay more to get the book, even if it's in a low grade, than what like usually like the difference between a 9.8 and 9.6, for example, like a very slight grade difference, um, can be 2 to 3 times the value. The difference between a 0.5 and a 1, which is really an incomplete book, versus a complete book but a really crappy complete book, can be very little. Like actually can be like, a couple $100 even on $1,000 book. It's really close, the difference between a 0.5 and a 1. And a 1 to a 1.5, very little difference, and a 1.8, so forth. The prices really start to spike after about a 6.0. So the point is, even the low grades, there's price compression, because there's so many people that want to get the book. There's so many people that love that book and just would love to have it in their collection. So what ends up happening is the low grade books actually hold a lot of value. And what that means, though, is it creates a buying opportunity, because there's some books which haven't really seen that price compression on the low end. And what you can do is you can buy into books that are in low grade, but are keys or blue chips that really haven't realized that value on the low end. So what you can do is buy in, like, I bought in on some really low grade books, but those books have seen greater returns than proportionally than the high grades, because there's more people that might have like $10,000 compared to $10 million. They're just, the number of collectors that can afford that low grade book is bigger. And since the book is worthy of being like a multi-million dollar book, well, there will be that much more demand for those books. So it's one of those cases where getting that low end book will be a pretty good investment, because there is that huge demand, and all these kind of blue chip books are kind of low supply. One of the things that I really want people to understand is there's a benefit as well. What will also happen on the low end, this is seeing these low end books as an investment tool. What will happen is, if the high end book sells, for example, I have All-Star number 6. I'm not sure if you can see it right there. Okay, I'm pointing to it. Well, All-Star 6 just recently sold 1.6 million. Now, what happens is that now is a new high. Before its highest record was 900,000. So all of a sudden, it went from 900,000 at its peak to now 1.6 million. And what does that do? That energizes the community, because they're like, oh my goodness, I might not be able to get this book anymore because the price is just going through the roof. They see that high-end price and they think, oh my goodness, it's almost like, it almost creates a concept of scarcity for that book, or like that book is almost unattainable now. So what ends up happening is the collectors are more driven to just buy the book. Just get whatever grade I can get, I will pay for it. So usually the prices kind of go up all the way through. But what you see actually is not just that they go up on the high end and trickle down, but it's more that the low end gets that surge first. And those books actually see a bigger jump in prices than the higher graded books, because it just energizes the market, and it's kind of interesting to see. So a lot of these low end books, it's amazing how much price compression that happens at the low end. So it's something to watch for. So a kind of a trick that you can do to kind of capitalize on this if you're really using comics as an investment tool is to buy key books that have a upcoming auction. So Heritage Auctions and Comic Connect, Comic Link, all these big auction houses, they will actually tell you maybe 3-4 months or further. Like I get catalogs from Heritage Auctions that they send out to me that tell me that 3 months from now there's going to be a big auction. They're going to show all these key books, and based on that, I know that those books will probably have some record sale. Well, that makes it a good opportunity to buy those low end books because we know that there's going to be that trickle down effect and those low end books will go up in value. So it's a way of investing into comics without that kind of reduces the risk. And that's where I want to get into the next point. So the next point is that low risk. So this is my third point, is low risk. When you're buying a high grade book, you're taking a lot of risk. And that is a real problem. That is a real problem because, if I spend $10 million on a book, or if I spend $100,000 on a book or $10,000 on a book because it's a high-end book, and then I'm putting a huge amount of money and putting a lot of risk into that book. For example, Eternals #1, that was like a multi-$1,000 book in high grade, and you're taking a huge risk that book is going to hold its value and it's going to be like a book that you can sell for the same level in the future. Well, that movie that came out with Eternals made that book plummet in value. So you can now pick up a 9.8 probably for under $1,000. And it's just like it died in terms of price, like 80% drop or something crazy drop. So, but the funny thing is, even though the price dropped on that high end a lot, the low end really didn't see much change. It really kind of held its value. So, and the risk that you put in is really small. So you could have picked up a low grade copy, like $50. It's like, that's pretty minor risk compared to several thousand that you would have had to put in to get that high grade. So you're locked in at a lower risk. And the rate, the amount that it goes down is generally less because there will still be people that are interested in that book, and they will be more likely to buy it at that lower end. So the weird thing is with low grade books, they generally are less price sensitive in terms of the drop and more price sensitive in terms of the rise, which is kind of weird that they get the benefit on both ends. But they do. It's just what I've noticed having, bought and sold, and not sold, but really just by buying comics a lot and just seeing how the market trends are reacting to these changes in price. So it's really interesting to see that the low-end books, low-grade books, often will kind of perform really well. One thing I should kind of say is, what do I mean by low grade books? I mean books that are generally grade 3.0 or less. So these are like the low grade books. Okay, I should have said that at the very beginning, but I figure, hey, I'll say it now. The next thing that I kind of hinted at is the high return on investment. So I sort of said one is the low risk. Well, now the next kind of cool thing about the low grade books is that high return. And I kind of got into this a little bit before, but when I said that when those high end books sell, well, it's the low grades that actually see the huge jumps in prices, and you get this kind of price compression at the low grades. That is very, very true. And it really does create that opportunity to sell the book. Because if there's any hype around a book, generally, there will be collectors that just want to get the book, and you can take advantage of that. So there's that high return where there's very little risk and a high return on your investment, because there's a bigger pool of people potentially going to buy it, and you can sort of cater to that pool of people, and get a pretty good return on your investment. The other thing is, even when we were doing this whole comic boom thing, like of 2021, what we saw was comic books would flip really quick. And I think it was a bit of a speculator's market and a flipper's market where people were, they were buying a bunch of books and they were like having fun buying a whole bunch of books, and then they would sell it the next week for double the money and they'd be all excited. And there was a lot of excitement about buying and selling. So basically, you'd buy a book. Let's say you spend $100 on it. Next, you would list it up on eBay for $200 or $150, some, thing where you get a profit margin right off the bat. Historically, that never happens. Can you imagine if that happened in any other industry? It wouldn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense that you can buy something and instantly get that kind of return. It just doesn't work with any other industry. Well, traditionally so. Last year was a bit different. It was a weird year. It was not very logical. The rate of return was just really too insane. But with low-end books, what you can find is there are kind of this weird buying opportunity. Often you can kind of act as a comic snob. This is sort of my buying approach, even though probably if you know me now, I buy so many low-grade books, you know that I'm not too much of a snob. But you can act as a snob and say, oh, it's in really rough shape. I want that higher grade. Oh, it doesn't really present very well. Like all these kind of things to try to get that price down. And then often what happens is that book you can kind of flip for a higher price because there will be people that want the book. And if it's a scarce book, you can definitely get that that return on your investment quite good, where you can get a high return on your investment because there'll be people that just want it. And, since you use that tactic of kind of downplaying the book, you can be aware that that's the tactic that will be used against you when you try to go sell it. But if you're smart, you can kind of play there's always another card that people forget. And especially, I know this card because I collect Golden Age, a lot of Golden Age books. The card that you can always play with the low-end books, low-grade books, I should say, is Scarcity. And that is really next point to to this whole list that I'm creating. Some of these books that I'm talking about, there might not be another copy that you might ever see. There is a scarcity factor. And I'm going to give you a good example of that. This is like a book you don't see often. You just don't see this book. It's Black Cat Comics #1. You can see it's a 1.0. It's a low grade. But because it is a scarce book, it is hard. Like people will want to pick it up. They want the book. There's a demand for it. It's the first Black Cat Comics. It's a cool book. It's a cool character, and they will want the book. So you might not see this book up for auction for a year or two. It might be that long before you see another copy up on the market. So you can always play with the low-end books, and it has to be with these kind of more desirable books. And the reason I'm saying I have to really qualify it. I'm not saying go out and buy low-grade books of modern keys. It just doesn't make any sense. This really applies to low grade books of either blue chip, Silver Age, Bronze Age, or Golden Age books. And it doesn't have to be a key at that point. It just has to be a book that's desirable in some way. For example, Black Cat Comics #1. It's desirable. And what'll happen is, because it's desirable, people will generally want to get it, and there will be that demand, that pent-up demand, especially if they don't see it for a couple of years. And really, you can take advantage of that, where you might not be able to get this book again in any grade, let alone a high grade. So you can sort of use that when you're selling it to get the highest rate of return, the highest value for your book. And that is that's my next reason. So what I've been trying to get at with some of these points that I've been making. So my first really is getting the book. Number 2 is low risk. And then number 3 is high return. You get that high return on your book. Number 4 for me is about security. And I kind of alluded to this already within what I was talking about, that these low-end books get the benefit of the price increase when a high-end book, when a book sells at a high price, then those low-grade books, they get that huge boost. And when the book tumbles, the amount of loss is not as big. It's not as big, or it might not be anything at all. It might actually hold its value even though it's a low grade, which is kind of weird that it kind of doesn't really get impacted as much. And that's the security factor. So this is my kind of fourth reason that I like low graded books, because there is that security in terms of holding its value. You might not see the book becoming like $1 million book, but you will generally get a secure investment where you'll get probably what you put into the book, if not more, based on the other things that I talked about. So there is that security with that book. Okay, so that is a big point for me, that it's a safe investment for the most part. Very low risk, usually good return, and if not, you're generally okay anyways. That it actually holds its value fairly well. Okay, my next reason, my next in my 5 reasons, is the quality. So one of the things that I kind of want to show, and I'm going to give a couple of examples on this, is that low grade books doesn't mean that it has to be an ugly book. It doesn't have to be like just something where it's literally falling apart and you just can't appreciate it in any way. I mean, there are low grade books that do fit that, but it doesn't mean that those are the books you have to buy. What I'm saying is buying low grade books that actually can present as high grade books. I'll give you an example. This is not necessarily the best example, but generally it kind of it'll give you a sense. So this is my Ellery Queen #1. It's a really great Golden Age classic cover, pre-code horror. Got the skulls on the ring, just a really great cover, just a nice good girl art too going on. And the issue with this book, it's a low grade, it's a 1.0, is the spine. The spine is generally totally gone. It's in bad shape. If it wasn't for this kind of, like, there was tape residue, you can see the tape right there. Now, it says, the notes on it, I'll read the notes. Spine of the cover completely split and reattached with tape. 2 extra staples added after manufacturing. Okay, those are the notes. So they basically added tape. I wish they hadn't, but they did. And it doesn't look as good as it could, but some books, if they didn't add the tape, it would have still gotten the 1.0. But in the slab, you can't really see that the spine is split, and it would present quite well. Actually, if it wasn't for this one little spot, it actually presents really, really well. I could hide the grade, and just if I didn't show this one line, you would actually think maybe it's a 4. It presents that well. It presents like a much higher grade than it is, and you can enjoy the cover. So one of the great things about the low grade books is you can actually get the affordability of the low grade without having to sacrifice that quality of the high grade. It's much easier to do that in a mid grade, but you can still do it in the low grade. So you don't always have to sacrifice the aesthetics of the book, is the point that I'm trying to get at. You can still get low grade books that present well but give you the ability to purchase it at an affordable price. It's just that nice. It's a great thing where you can buy a book that you really want with a great cover at an affordable price because it is that low grade. And that's really what I'm trying to get at, that you don't have to sacrifice the aesthetics to get that cool book. Now I'm going to give you one more bonus thing, and I kind of alluded to this as well earlier. Was that especially in the golden age, you might never see some of these books. Like you have to get what you have. Like what it is what it is. There's not that many copies. Like some of the books that I have, there's literally, like, I'll show you one. Let's grab it. I showed this just like a few days ago, and it's in ugly shape. It is, if it wasn't for that. Okay, it's this one. This one, 0 on the census. There's just none of these on the census. It's a great Canadian white book, Spy Smasher, with Captain Marvel on the cover. It's in low grade, you can see. Spine is totally mangled. If it wasn't for that, actually, it would present quite well. It's actually not a bad looking book. But because it is in rough shape, I was able to pick it up for $40. Well, you know, this in a slightly higher grade goes for about $500. So, you know, it's one of those books that I think is undervalued. And probably if I got it slabbed, you know, I could probably, you know, get that higher price, or close to it, I should say. Because as I said, on the low grades, there is that price compression where there's really little difference. That's why, you know, sometimes it's really good to buy these low grade books, you know, because you can get them really cheap. And you might not see that book again. It's just, they're so rare. This book, you know, I've never seen it before. It's so rare. There's none on the census, and they don't even have a photo of it because it's that rare. They don't even know what it looks like. But it's a book that is desirable for especially Canadian collectors like myself. And I actually know a lot of American collectors that like Canadian whites because there's something kind of cool about them that you wouldn't be able to get. So this is sometimes you have to buy what you have, you know, what it's out there. And being open to the idea of getting that lower end book means that you're not limiting yourself, because you might never see a high grade book. I mean, there are many golden age books that the highest grade is a 4. Like there's just no high grade copies of certain books. They just don't exist because, you know, time is not really nice to comic books. So I'm just trying to show you that with this last example, that be a little bit open-minded about the low-end books in terms of not missing out on those opportunities because you say, oh, well, I'll wait for a better copy to come. Because sometimes it might be the case that a better copy will never come because it's just such a rare book. So I hope you enjoyed my 6 reasons. I'll kind of go through them quickly again because they kind of all flow together a bit. So 1, just to get the book. 2, low risk. Number 3 is high return. Number 4 is security. And number 5 is good quality without having to, like, good quality for the price, I guess. You know, you can get that good quality for price. And the last one is availability, that you might never see this book again. And that's my bonus one. So 5 plus 1, a bit of a bonus one there at the end. So I hope you enjoyed this video. What do you think about low-end books? What do you like low-grade books? Do you think that they're a good investment? Do you think that would you buy a low-grade book? Comment below. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.